From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks, Ollie. Welcome to Monday's Richie Allen Show. How you doing? It's coming up for 3 minutes past 5. It is the 14th of January 2019. I say this every Monday, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Hope you had a nice weekend. Hope it was restful and relaxing. I've got an interesting show for you today.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
And as usual, tweet it right now. Don't wait. It's at Richie Allen Show. Tweet me now. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. All right.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, Polly St. George has a YouTube channel under the name Amazing Polly. It's a really, really good channel. It's very different, very original. And Polly takes on a number of very important geopolitical issues on her channel. It's got tens of thousands of followers. Really like it. Invited her to come on the programme today. We're going to be talking about banking, financial technology, and how that is being used and will be increasingly used to control those who oppose the globalist agenda. It's a very important subject, and we'll talk about that and more with the Amazing Polly. Check out the YouTube channel Amazing Polly as Polly St. George joins the programme this hour. And then he's not been on the programme for over a year and a half, but he's an old friend of mine. Peter Paul Parker joins the show. He's a Bach flower practitioner. He's a healer, a dietary consultant, but over the years he's become an expert on EMF technologies, 5G and your health. Different take on this with Peter Paul Parker in the second hour. Pretty packed Richie Allen Show for Monday, January 14th, 2019. Always good to be with you. Thanks for tuning in, and do keep in touch with me through Twitter. All right. Yeah, I wonder is my great friend Jean Ann listening. I was supposed to ring her this morning at 9 o'clock, but I got up later than usual. Had a very rare thing today. I had a lie-in. Everything went an hour, was pushed forward by an hour or two. Should have dropped her an email. My pal, she might be listening. I'll be in touch in the morning if she's around. Not the best in the world, mate, to be... I should make lists. Lists are a good thing. Make lists. But anyway, yeah. I did have a lie-in this morning, and I enjoyed it. But enough of lying in even. Enough of staying in bed. The Brexit fear-mongering reached all levels. Well, it reached a new level of patheticness today. Is there a word? Patheticness, is that a word? Could you get a Scrabble score with that? There was a story about a Brexit survival kit that you can buy for 300 quid. 300 quid. And what you've got is freeze-dried food for 30 days, water filter, and you've got fire-starting gel. Because we're so useless now in the noughties, in the 2010s, that we can no longer start a fire for ourselves. I swear to Jesus, I never knew that there was such a thing as fire-starting gel. How rubbish are we? Oh, God. You going camping? You are. Have you got your tent? You have. Have you got the barbecue? Yeah. Have you got the fire-starting gel? Because you're useless. Anyway, Theresa May has urged MPs, you probably heard Ollie Barrett, to back her Brexit deal for the country's sake as tomorrow's vote looms ever closer. She warned of paralysis in Parliament and honouring the deal and all of that. Do you want to hear a bit of Theresa? I've just loaded it up. Do you know what's been happening to me lately? I've been getting to deadline literally on the news. I'm normally prepared 20-25 minutes beforehand. I'm now doing stuff while the news is on. Here's Theresa May in Stoke this morning. In Stoke!
As we've seen over the last few weeks, there are some in Westminster who would wish to delay or even stop Brexit and who will use every device available to them to do so. I asked them to consider the consequences of their actions on the faith of the British people in our democracy. The House of Commons did not say to the people of Scotland or Wales, that despite voting in favour of the devolved legislature, Parliament knew better and would overrule them, or else force them to vote again? What if we found ourselves in a situation where Parliament tried to take the UK out of the EU in opposition to a Remain vote? People's faith in the democratic process and their politicians would suffer catastrophic harm. We all have a duty to implement the result of the referendum. But while no deal remains a serious risk, having observed events at Westminster over the last 7 days, it's now my judgment that the more likely outcome is a paralysis in Parliament that risks there being no Brexit. That makes it even more important that MPs consider very carefully how they will vote tomorrow night.
Right, now apparently she's not got a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding tomorrow. That was a smidgen of what she had to say today in Stoke. Now she's been speaking since then because she addressed Parliament a very short time ago, which is why I was editing till 5 o'clock there. She addressed Parliament, did Theresa May, and she spoke of letters exchanged between her, Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker of the European Council and the European Commission. And in those letters, the European Union said that it didn't want to use the backstop, but if it did use the backstop, it would be for the shortest possible period. And the European Union also said that these assurances did have legal value. Now that's complete nonsense, right? The only thing that is legal value, and I know you're going to laugh at me for saying this, for being naive, is a contract, some sort of hard contract written and notarized. But the EU are saying, oh, don't worry about it, we don't want to use the backstop and we'll do all we can not to use the backstop. So those were the letters. So Theresa May took this to Parliament and she told Parliament and her opposite number, Jeremy Corbyn, as you will hear now, that there's no other way the European Union wouldn't go any further than that. Here's May a short time ago.
Mr. Speaker, I know that some members would ideally like a unilateral exit mechanism or a hard time limit to the backstop. I've explained this to the EU and tested these points in negotiations. But the EU would not agree to this because they fear that such a provision could allow the UK to leave the backstop at any time without any other arrangements in place and require a hard border to be erected between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Which is just stuff and nonsense, is all it is. The European Union said commitments to look at alternatives to the customs arrangement and to fast-track talks on future relations had legal value and would be treated in the most solemn manner. May said we should take their word for it. Nobody wants this backstop. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, not impressed with the assurances given by May.
On receiving this letter today, the Prime Minister from the President of the EU Commission and the Council, it must now be clear to all members across this House, yet again, the Prime Minister has completely and utterly failed to do that. Today's letter is nothing more than a repetition of exactly the same position that was pulled more than 1 month ago. It categorically does not give the legal assurances this House was promised and contains nothing but warm words and aspirations.
Yes, and I agree with the leader of the opposition, and I don't like any of these characters. He's right, it's all a play. The backstop is a nonsense, the backstop, isn't it? Talked about this for a long time, and I think because the media is so mendacious in how it reports on this stuff, and it deliberately muddles people, muddles their minds, clouds their minds. People don't understand it. What's the backstop? What's the backstop? The backstop was an idea introduced to the whole Brexit withdrawal process by the European Union. The European Union said, we've had peace on the island of Ireland for so long now, we can't jeopardise that. And if we fail to agree a trade deal after the UK leaves, well, we can't have the we can't have a border on the island of Ireland. If we don't have a deal, we can't have a hard border, because it'll regress to the bad old days, which is complete nonsense. So the backstop idea is that if there is no trade deal and the UK just crashes out with no trade agreement whatsoever, Northern Ireland would stay in the customs union to prevent a hard border. Unionists pissed off by that, understandably. Brexiteers pissed off by that, understandably. And that's where you are. It is a nonsense, this whole thing. It was all a pretty crafty plan by the bureaucrats in Brussels to do everything they can to stop the UK leaving. What happens tomorrow when May loses? Apparently she's going to get about 190 votes. There's going to be over 400 against her. Calamitous defeat, that. What will happen then? Well, she will lose, and then Labour will seek to exploit. Here's John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, speaking to BBC Radio.
All the information so far is that Theresa May's deal will go down, and you know, it would have gone down a month ago. She's delayed it to try and pick up more support. That doesn't seem to have worked. She's delayed it to get more assurances. That doesn't seem to have worked. So let's just get on, vote this thing down, and then we'll consider our position with regard to the no confidence motion.
Yeah. We'll consider our position with regards to the no confidence motion. They're not likely to win a no confidence motion, Labour. It just gets messier and messier. It's chaos. It is the climate of chaos. Wonderful, isn't it? Chaos, manufactured chaos. And to the average man and woman on the street, it doesn't feel manufactured, it feels very real. The uncertainty, the nervousness, all manufactured, not just here, but stateside as well and everywhere else around the world. Here's a bit of madness. The former chief of UK immigration enforcement, a man called David Wood, suggested over the weekend that abuse of the asylum system is rife and that it is being used by economic migrants. He's probably right. In fact, I'm pretty sure he is right. Wood suggested in a new report published at the weekend that people seeking asylum in the UK should take a lie detector test as part of their application.
What kind of fuckery is this?
A lie detector test as part of their application. David Curtin, the education spokesman for the UK Independence Party, otherwise known as UKIP, David Curtin likes the idea.
Well, I mean, there certainly is a problem with illegal immigration into the country, and there certainly is a problem with people who are claiming to be refugees who are not genuine refugees, and people who are gaming the system. And we need every tool at our disposal to find out who these people are, because it's not fair to people who are genuine refugees, and it's not fair to people who want to migrate for economic reasons but go through the proper system. They make an application at the embassy or the consulate in a foreign country, maybe spend months or years to get their visa to come to the UK. So we need to find out who is gaming the system so that their applications can be refused.
Yeah, David Curtin. Human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan isn't convinced the tech is accurate, though. He isn't convinced the tech is reliable. That's the lie detector equipment. Here is the human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan.
They have basically been scientifically debunked for many years now, and that's the main reason they're not used in the criminal justice system, in any legal system. They're not admissible in court. That's the reason, because they're just inherently unreliable. We don't know how reliable they are, whether they're trustworthy. Also, another reason, obviously, just looking at the science behind it, obviously they're not, they're called lie detectors, but what they basically do is judge any changes in nervous system, any changes in facial expression, any changes in heartbeat, whether someone's sweating, that sort of thing.
Yes, thanks to RT there. Good stuff on RT about that proposal from the former head of the... What was he the head of again? This guy, David Wood, the former head of UK Immigration Enforcement, is that we give lie detector tests to people who are coming into the country claiming asylum. Not economic migrants, but people saying that I have to be here because if I return to my country of origin, I will be in a bad state. Take them up to the highest buildings in London, hold them upside down by their ankles over the ledges of these buildings and shout at them, and then you'll find out who's telling the truth. Were you tortured? Were you? Were you? Were you jailed? Were you starved? And shake them, and that's how you'll find it. It's just, it's so ridiculous, the idea of giving people lie detector tests. Surely a better way of determining whether somebody is genuinely fleeing oppression or not. Surely it's easier to do than giving people lie detector tests. Here's a thought, though. Just a thought. How about we stop giving billions of pounds worth of arms to countries like Saudi Arabia to murder people in Yemen? How about that? How about we stop inventing organisations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and getting them to lay waste to countries in the Middle East? And maybe you wouldn't have so many asylum seeker applicants to process. I should say applications to process. Maybe, just maybe. It's just a thought. The US President Donald Trump was offended today. He was asked by reporters as he was jumping on a helicopter, did you ever work for Russia? Or are you working for Russia now? On Saturday, he was on Fox News and he was asked the same question.
I want to move on to another subject. New York Times reported that the FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation the day after you fired James Comey in May of 17. And the investigation was whether you were actively working for Russia or unwittingly. So I'm going to ask you, are you now or have you ever worked for Russia, Mr. President?
I think it's the most insulting thing I've ever been asked. I think it's the most insulting article I've ever had written. And if you read the article, you'd see that they found absolutely nothing. But the headline of that article, it's called The Failing New York Times for a reason. They've gotten me wrong for 3 years. They've actually gotten me wrong for many years before that. But you look at what's going on. You know, I fired James Comey. I call him Lion James Comey because he was a terrible liar, and he did a terrible job as the FBI director. Look at what happened with Hillary Clinton and the emails and the Hillary Clinton investigation, one of the biggest screw-ups that anybody's ever seen as an investigation. And what happened after I fired him, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, his lover, Lisa Page, they did it. And, you know, they're all gone. Most of those people, many, many people from the top ranks of the FBI, they've all been fired or they had to leave.
Yeah, Donald Trump. And, you know, in that interview, Trump got into Hillary Clinton and the emails. Now, Hillary is Satan in flat shoes, right? No doubt about it. And the email scandal. Because of the stuff that Hillary Clinton is into, stuff that would make Genghis Khan blush. Okay, I'm not going to get into it now because I don't have time to get into it. She was using a private email server and not the government allocated email server. Hillary Clinton is as crooked as a 7-bob note, one of the most bent politicians in human history, and that is the least of her crimes. But what happened to prosecuting her, Donald? Why did you say after you were elected that you didn't want to hurt Hillary or Bill because they're good people? Why didn't you go after them like you promised those who voted for you? And I'll tell you why. Because Donald might be bad, but the Clintons are the devil, right? And they're far further up the food chain than the hairpiece himself. So don't be bitching about Hillary's emails. That's the least of her crimes, by the way. Are you well, by the way? This is the Richie Allen Show for Monday, January 14th, 2019. Welcome to it. Good to be with you. Got a top show this week. Garrod O'Colmon is back with me. Jim Fetzer is on. Gerald Salente as well. Lots going on the Richie Allen Show. Coming up next, it's Polly St. George after this from AC/DC. 23 minutes past the hour, AC/DC, You Shook Me, all night long on the Richie Allen Show. Well, I'm really glad that I found my first guest. She's a terrific broadcaster. I think she's absolutely terrific. And I came across her YouTube channel. It was initially through a friend of mine, Gemma O'Doherty, a brilliant Irish journalist, who said to me, you've got to check out this lady on YouTube. So I checked her out. She's on YouTube. Her channel is Amazing Polly. There's only one. So if you go to youtube.com, it's Amazing Polly. And you can follow her on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is @99freemind, @99freemind. free mind. A really, really well. She's been around. She's been doing it for about 3 years, and she's amassed tens of thousands of followers on YouTube and on Twitter. And she tackles subjects, of course, that are not being talked about on commercial or national media. Really interesting subjects. We'll get into one or two of those today. She's in Ontario in Canada. Let's welcome to the programme Polly St. George. Tell you what, Polly, I'm really glad you're on. How are you?
I'm great. It's really nice to speak with you.
Well, thanks for coming on, because I'm not sure you've done too many of these before where you've been on programmes. So I'm really glad that you've come on. How did you get into it, Polly? It's first of all, congratulations on the YouTube channel and on the subject matters that you're tackling. I mean it. I'm not being sycophantic when I say I really love it. So congratulations on it. What sparked you off to get into it and to make the channel and do what it is you do?
Well, way back when I first began the channel, it was all about narcissism, the phenomenon of how it happens, how it develops in families, and the different roles that everybody is reduced to playing within a sort of narcissistic dynamic where there's a false narrative, and within that system, you either are the person in charge of the narrative, or you are an enabler of the narrative, you're a scapegoat, or you're a golden child. And once I got that language and that understanding of the psychology of it, it started to become apparent that most of us out here in the world are living within a variety of false narratives, and we're all playing one of those roles. And you can apply that to the political sphere, family sphere, work sphere. I mean, there are obviously healthy narratives and dynamics that people are involved in, but it's only a problem when those narratives turn false and you're expected to support a lie, basically. So that's what I started with in my channel. And then I moved sort of to covering it in terms of Canadian politics. And then it just blossomed from there. It just got bigger and bigger. I started to look at more and more global narratives.
It's very cerebral. I can't pay a higher compliment than that.
Thank you.
No, especially, you're very good at simplifying things as well. That's important to say. But some of the subjects that we're going to touch on now, financial tech, it's great. It's good to, we don't anymore. Many years ago we did on national channels. We did get thought-provoking and in-depth coverage and analysis of stuff. We don't anymore. Just before we talk about fintech or financial tech, how much of a barrier then is narcissism to, how much of a barrier is it to wider society starting to wake up and understand what's really happening to them? Well,
I think that's the fundamental, for me, it's the fundamental thing to understand. It's the false narrative is the thing that's poisoning our politics, our workplaces, and even, I think, our relationships with our fellow countrymen, because it has become so polarized now. The false narrative is reflected back through all media channels at this point, and in order to break out of it, you need that crack of light. You need some truth that is not being represented in the mainstream media. And it used to be, like you just said, it used to be that we did have some investigative journalists and a lot of TV shows actually on the mainstream that would do in-depth looks at different subject matters. And each one of those provided a chance for a person to wake up, to say, oh, I've been fooled. This is not at all what I thought it was. And with that little crack of light, people were able to start questioning other things. But what's happened now in the last couple of years in particular, I think, is the media has really closed ranks. The censorship regime, I call it the information cartel. It's all consuming now. And anyone questioning those official narratives is censored, booted off. I mean, Gemma just got her YouTube live streaming ability taken away from her. For just one example.
I didn't know that. Was that today? Well, I didn't hear that now. I've not been in touch with her over the last couple of days. That's terrible.
Yeah, we were supposed to do an interview on Saturday, and someone made a copyright claim against one of her videos, and it's bogus, really. But YouTube acted immediately, and they took her ability to do live streams down. So if you don't see videos from her, that's why. She hasn't gone away. She hasn't given up, but YouTube has censored her, basically.
That's outrageous. Yeah, I go to ground over the weekend. I just bury my head in the sand.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, you have to get away from it. I'll drop her a note later on. Really, really good journalist. And it was Gemma weeks and weeks ago put me on to you, Polly. I started watching the videos and thought, this is terrific stuff. I want to be promoting this. Not that you need any help from me. You've got a huge channel.
I owe her and you a debt of thanks. So thank you very much, guys.
It's great to be able to connect. Now, you're fascinated by a lot of things, but at the moment, in recent uploads and recent streams, you've been talking about financial technology and the speed of it and how it is being or will be used in the future to control opponents of the, we'll call it the globalist agenda. We can give it very many different names. I think it's never been more important now to be talking about this. People need to understand this, need to hear it. They need to understand that their relationship with technology, but also with the financial, I don't want to say the financial elites, but the financial pillars of our society, their relationship with them or it is going to have to change in terms of going to understand it. How serious is this issue? The control of people through finance and through financial technology and our reliance on it.
Well, it's huge. It's probably the fundamental control that they have. I mean, money is it's our key to survival in the modern world, obviously. And what it looks like is happening is there's sort of a new colonialism happening, but there's many complex methods that they're using to enact this. But what I would say is that the payment processing services have grown and grown, especially with the digital economy. So they are competing with the banks, but they're also controlled by the banks at the same time. A number of things that have come into being in the EU in the last little while, one of them was to open up the financial field for sort of middlemen like MasterCard and Visa and PayPal and things like that. Also Union Credit, even from China, which is a Chinese credit card company. And because they want a piece of this market, they're sort of more beholden to the EU rules of the internet, like this GDPR that has come in.
Yes.
And that leads you right down the road to censorship. So what it looks like is happening, and there's a guy on Twitter who is doing a lot of great research on this. He's Nick Monroe, that people can go look at. But it looks like MasterCard is one of the big players in removing speech, I can't call it anything else, that doesn't agree with some of the globalist agenda items like open borders and climate change and all of the things that people might want to put under that umbrella.
Yeah.
Not only that, there's a second element to this. They're rushing into Africa, into small villages, and they're erecting cell towers all over the place. The mobile phone companies are going in there at a record pace, and they're providing people with either apps on their cell phone or these cards, and they're called conditional cash transfer cards. And what it is you agree to do certain things, and then whoever has given you this card or this app will advance money onto your card. Now, I'm not aware of any of the conditions. I can't tell you what they are. But when we consider the mysterious ability of people from African countries to make it all the way over to across the sea, like there was a bunch that just arrived in Mexico, I guess, and they were talking to a reporter, and they told that reporter it cost $16,000 for them to get over there. And I wonder who is financing this movement, and could it link back to these conditional cash transfer cards, almost like a job, an under the table job, if you want to look at it that way. So those are the two big issues I see with this financial technology as a sort of new colonialism. It's helping the censorship of people speaking out against certain things, and it's also mobilizing people from the third world to maybe make decisions that aren't in the best interest of themselves or the countries that they're arriving in. Get
them into debt, Polly, right? It's about getting people into debt. I know it's about far more than that, and it's brilliant that you're talking about this because it's multifaceted. But if you get them into debt, you can then leverage them, or you can use whatever real wealth they might have as collateral, so you can take their land, you can take whatever.
Absolutely. And if you consider that in the case of the conditional cash transfer cards, that it would be periodic. And so if they don't fulfill whatever obligations they were supposed to fulfill, and I don't know what those might be. There could be good intentions behind this. I don't know. But those people are very, very beholden to whoever is doing those cash transfers. They're totally dependent on them. Imagine getting over to, say, Mexico from, I don't know, Eritrea or something.
Yeah.
And then they decide they're not going to put any more cash on this card. Or, I mean, it's just very dangerous. That's what I see it as. Like I said, a colonialism, this freakish level of control from people who want to play God way above elected representatives through foundations, through massive corporations and that sort of thing.
I want to thank you, by the way, because I'd not come across conditional cash transfer cards or systems until I watched your videos on them. See, that's the beauty of independent research and independent broadcasting.
Well, that's just it. I would think this sort of thing would be covered in our mainstream news. And I think that's the danger, is that most people, I would say, 90% of people still, well, maybe not that high. I could be optimistic. Maybe it's lower. They think to themselves, if it was really important, if it was really an emergency, the news would tell me. The news would be bringing my attention to this. And since the news isn't bringing their attention to this, they tend to think, oh, you're being dramatic. This is nothing to worry about. Just carry on. That's really dangerous, in my opinion. It's
very dangerous. Polly St. George is live on the line from Ontario in Canada. If you haven't checked Polly out before, she's on YouTube. If you Google Amazing Polly YouTube, you'll get her straight away. I recommend you subscribe to the channel and watch the videos on there. There are many, many uploads. Polly's been on there only a short time, only 2.5, 3 years, but has amassed a lot of followers, a lot of admirers because of her laid back approach, but also her journalistic approach. It's about the information, not about the personality, which I have a lot of time for, Polly, as these issues are hugely important. You talked a bit about China, social credit system in China, conditional cash transfer, say it for me again, Polly, it's conditional cash transfer cards. Transfer cards, right. So we have this terrifying kind of dystopian thing happening in China where people are on this social crediting system. The country is that, you can be restricted, your travel can be restricted if you do something that offends the state. And it might be just hanging around, or it might be just dropping a piece of litter. It might be offending a neighbour. It might be anything. And now we're talking about this for companies at the moment in the Western world. But this system could very easily kind of morph into some sort of social crediting system for us in the UK and you in Canada, whereby your banking or your access to your money is conditioned on how you behave and how you act in society, right?
Yes, this is one of the scariest things that's happening in the world right now. To me, because apparently what this Sesame credit system does in China is it uses a variety of things that they can find out about you online, including dating sites and posts on social media websites, and also your associations through friendships, liking posts, whatever people you follow online. And it gives you a score as to, the only way I can really put it is how worthy you are. Yeah. As a human being. And right now they're saying it's to help people in China get access to credit for mortgages or other loans. But is it? Because like you say, they will refuse you a visa. They will refuse you airline tickets if they find your social credit score is too low. This morning, I ran across an article that says that Canada, where I live, is the first country that's going to be taking into consideration Chinese nationals' social credit scores when dealing with them through immigration and review. So it would be very easy for our countries to move to this system. Data is the new oil. All the companies are busy harvesting your data, running it through their analytics system, and who knows what they're using it for. We don't know what they're using it for. They're selling it to third parties, and they say they can put a pretty comprehensive picture of a person together through this data. Whether they're accurate or not, they don't even care. It's a gold rush. It's an oil rush. And so this is big business. And
it'll turn us into, not trying to be flippant now, but it'll turn us into the Stepford wives, won't it? Or the Stepford children. You'll find that future generations will basically be, I don't know, some kind of class of people completely devoid of any individuality or personality, because you summed it up brilliantly. I wouldn't have thought of it in those terms, how worthy you are. In order to prove or to show how worthy you are, you'll just become robotic in nature.
Yes. That is the big fear. I mean, people are already hesitant to say something that they perceive might be outside of group favor. Have you ever seen an experiment called the Ash experiment?
No, tell me about it.
It was very simple. It was done, I think, in the 60s. And what they did was they brought in one genuine participant into a classroom of all actors. Of course, everyone in the room, only the one guy knew. What I mean is, sorry, there was all actors and one genuine participant. And the task was simple. A teacher or a lecturer showed them a picture of 3 lines that were very, very different in length. And then they held up an image of a line, and it clearly corresponded to either A, B, or C. And what they did was they had all of the actors answer incorrectly at first. Like if the line match was letter B, everyone in the room would say C. And then the genuine person who wasn't in on the gag was asked to give his answer. And he would, most of the time, I think it was 67% of the time, he agreed with the group, even though the evidence was right in front of him in the form of a simple line length test. He would agree with the group instead of saying what was truly before his eyes. So when you add that experiment to what would happen with something like social credit, where every move you make is being judged for conformity with a group, I think it shows how easy it would be to manipulate everyone into sort of, I call it the gray rectangle. We'll all just be living in the gray rectangle.
Who does it benefit, Polly? Who do you think? I don't want to. We don't have to get too deep into who. I mean, I've got theories that maybe some people think are outlandish, but that's okay. It's a free word for the time being, anyway, and we can speculate. Who or what is behind that? Because that really is something out of a science fiction film. You and I are similar in age. We would have watched science fiction films in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And the films we watched in the 1980s, many of them predicted some sort of a crazy world where, we were sent for re-education, or we all became, we all conformed. Who's behind it? Who or what is behind it, do you think?
Well, first, let me just say that I think I just posted the other night that almost all of those dystopian futures that I feared and was so thankful we didn't live in from those sci-fi movies, I feel like there's a combination, and we're living all of them now. Yeah. Very, very close. But who benefits from this? It feels like to me that there is a consolidation period, and the major corporations are vying for supremacy. I envision a sort of a future where there's one bank, one energy company, one food company, and they're in a consolidation period. I believe it benefits them because if you consider what they want, a global world where, let's say they produce potatoes and they put them all around on these ships, and they dispense them to all of us as if we're franchises or something of a central government. It benefits them because we can be predictable then, right? If they can control us through this social conformity, social credit system, they can predict exactly how many potatoes we'll buy, how many of these new fridges we'll buy. I think it's as simple as that. Not to mention that once these sorts of people have as much money as they could ever want, which most of them do, the only other thing for them is control and to play God and to feel like they've won the game of world domination, I guess. Not to be too dramatic.
No, I agree with you. I think you're spot on. Polly St. George is our guest this hour. We've got Polly till the top of the hour. We could or should have maybe arranged for a longer conversation, but maybe next time Polly comes on, you'll come back. Exactly, and we'll do a longer segment. But it's a lovely introduction. Nationalism has become a dirty word, hasn't it? By the way, it's amazing, Polly, on YouTube. I know I've said that, but I'll say it again. Nationalism is a dirty word, and the same corporate elites are behind that agenda, because obviously it suits them. It's easier to control everybody if you're using single organisations. So you talked about one corporation, one bank. Ultimately, they would love to have a one world government. This is true. It's not a conspiracy theory, because it's easier to control the masses if there's only one governing entity. That's why I've always believed the European Union was not about peace in Europe post-World War II. It was about the corporations, the ones who supported the war in the first place, getting control, getting easier access to control. And they're making things like nationalism a dirty word. It's funny we're talking about the European Union just briefly. They're trying to associate those who aspire to a sense of national identity, and a sense that, you know, we should do what's right for the people in our country. Not that we ignore our neighbours and our friends, but we should look after our own people. They're really trying to make that a dirty word, aren't they?
Absolutely. And it's such a shame, because I think what we all loved about travel, meeting new people, was the differences between us. That should be preserved. I mean, to me, any right-thinking person would agree that it's, even the progressives always say, we want to be accepted for who we are with all of our differences. But what they seem to miss is that they are trying to make us all the same. And I mean exactly the same, all the way down from the way we think to what our malls look like, what products are available in our stores, what laws we have, when we turn on our heat, when we turn on our air conditioning, everything. I cherish national identity because it's the spice of life. It's the spice of life. I love meeting people from all over the world. I love to see the different cultures when I travel. So the actual definition of nationalism is nothing to fear, but through their Mockingbird Media mouthpieces, they have conjured up, they've used their wizardry to associate that word with negative images. And I think it's as simple as that. It's a bit of a brainwashing technique, a thought reform technique. It's the same with the word populism. Populism scares who? It scares the elites, because if you look up the definition, the antonym of populism is elitism. Populism simply means concerns, support for the concerns of ordinary people. That is the actual definition of populism. And none of us regular people should be afraid of that. Absolutely not.
Loads of tweets on this. If you haven't followed Polly on YouTube, do so. She's also on Twitter, by the way, and you can find her on Twitter. Polly, what's your Twitter handle again? I've got it here. It's not amazing, Polly. It's at 99 Free Mind. Yeah, 99, just an easy one to remember. At 99 Free Mind. Follow Polly there. Loads of tweets on this. To see what people are tweeting me, just go to twitter.com, Richie Allen Show, all one word. If you type it in, all one word, you'll see what people are tweeting to me, and a lot of interest in this today. A lot of our listeners, unsurprisingly, knew all about Paul. I'm the last person to know anything ordinarily, but that's the beauty of it. What about the difficulties with friends and family who don't want to engage remotely, read these issues? Polly you talked very well about that in your video about September the 11th. Jean Ann Crowley, a terrific Irish actress, friend of ours, is tweeting, is sending me a message now, and says she watched your video about 9/11, loved it. It was a brilliant video. It's one I haven't watched myself, actually. I'll make it my business to watch it later. How do you deal with friends and family who don't want to engage remotely? They just don't want to go there. How do you deal with that, Polly?
Well, I have to be honest, and I learned my lesson. I would stay away from topics like that. In the early days, I would bring it up excitedly, thinking this will be an interesting conversation. We can bond over this. We can all give our thoughts on what we saw. Let's take September 11th, what we saw that didn't sit well with us, or questions we have, or questions we were astounded that the media never asked, that sort of thing. But people reacted very badly. I'm sure all your listeners understand what I'm saying. You could see the change in their facial expression, right? They didn't want to go there. And so I didn't bring it up very often to my friends and family. That being said, I still brought it up enough or other things up enough that I currently don't have a relationship with my family. And I've lost most of my friends over the years. I mean, it's been a long time now since that happened, so I'm over it. But what I want to say, this is positive to me. This is a long process. I've been involved in this a long time. And the last 2 years has seen more people willing to engage with these types of topics than ever. I had resigned myself kind of to figuring I was just going to have to live sort of a double life, keep all of my real feelings to myself until I died. I really thought that's how it was going to be. And I would play the game. I would go out there and talk about shopping and nail polish and whatever else at family dinners for the rest of my life. But then I don't know if it was Trump getting elected.
Polly's just dropped out there momentarily. We'll see, can we get her back? The internet connection is... Oh, sorry, Polly, we just lost you momentarily, but you're back. You were just mentioning, you said, I don't know if it was Trump getting elected, you said.
That phrase, F-A-K-E news. Anyway, I see an awakening happening. So I think things are getting better, even though they feel like they're getting worse.
I'm with you. Sorry, we lost you momentarily. We lost about 15, 20 seconds there. My apologies. You just dropped out. Probably not your fault. It's probably the connection at our end, so don't worry about that. I can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Loud and clear. And I think you were just talking about Trump talking about fake news, and that was obviously it was obviously an important time for you.
Well, I don't know if it was that or if it was just coincidental timing of things coming to a head in various countries around the world and Trump got elected sort of right at that point or whatever. But in the last couple of years, I feel more positive than I have felt. Now, that's only on the level of people being willing to engage some of these subjects. I mean, we can feel the craziness and the crisis points getting closer. I don't know if it's real or what, but I mean, you look at what's happening in France, obviously, is a huge thing. And there's yellow vests in Canada as well. Belgium, of course, got their prime minister or president. I think, did he step down?
The Belgian prime minister.
Yeah.
The Belgian prime minister, no, or at least I don't think so. I'll be embarrassed now if he did, but he might have done. Can I ask you about these protests? One of the things that concerns me, I think these protests, like the Yellow Vest protests, are genuine protests. I worry, though, that the people, while the rising up and demanding change is genuine, are often directed towards Trojan horses. Does that worry you?
Yes, absolutely. But it's sort of a catch-22 because the people need to be able to express themselves, and they've taken away our ability to do it through the normal means, which is usually using our words, being involved in debates, writing editorials to the paper, appearing on television shows, even our YouTube channels and blogs and that. They're censoring it all. And the frustration level, our politicians basically laugh at our concerns. They don't care what we want, what we say. They just think they know better and they go ahead. So people have to be able to get their concerns across. And so, like you say, I think the movement is genuine. Anytime you get a motivated group of people, you're going to have agents provocateurs and infiltrators, and they're going to try to steer the movement one way or the other. I mean, look what happened in the Ukraine. It was awful what happened there. And will we ever know the truth, really? I don't know. What else?
By the way, I'm a complete and utter donkey. Of course, the Belgian Prime Minister stepped down back in December. This is I had a brain freeze. Of course, Charles Michel, there was a no confidence motion issued in him and he stepped down.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, my apologies. Of course, yeah. It's for somebody of my experience to tell you no, it did. Of course, it happened. Yeah,
no. There's so much to think about. Gosh, I didn't know what happened.
You caught me on the hop there, which is no bad thing. But you're absolutely right. He did. He absolutely did. And of course, well, the Ukraine, the coup in Ukraine, of course, was enacted by the former Eurasian Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, right? The wife of Bob Kagan, the neocon. I mean, that was a complete coup there.
Yes.
And I think people are seeing it. I think they are waking up to it, and they are moving. I just worry that the establishment sees that and presents them with figures to follow and kind of throw in behind. I don't want to kind of labour that point, but I know I just have. But that's what concerns me. It's not that I want people to just do nothing, you know, and say, oh, well, we can't do anything because we can't trust him or we can't trust her. But I gave up on politics a long time ago, Polly, a long time ago. Having been a mainstream...
It is a farce right now.
It's a farce, isn't it? I mean, I look at Trump and I think, and I've been very critical of him. I've been a lot more critical of his opponents, believe you me. But I think I've been a little bit wrong on Trump in terms of, I think Trump as a character is genuine. I think when Trump says the things that he said about pulling out of countries and not intervening in the affairs of others and, you know, protecting jobs at home and all that, I think the guy means the stuff when he says it. But I think within the system that he's in, there's nothing he can ever do to change things. But that's just my opinion. I don't ram, you know, that down people's throats. What do you think on that point? You've more sympathy with him, I think, than I have.
I see your point. Sometimes I kind of go back and forth because I want to be hopeful. I am naturally drawn to like this last shred of hope sort of thing. I wonder if it is too difficult a battle. I think he does want to make many changes, but you can see different points if you look closely where he has not done what I personally would consider is the right thing. Just little things like the 5G and the satellites they're launching and some appointments he's made that are concerning. But he's so much better than what we would have had for the alternative. And I'll
give you this, Polly. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to give you this. I don't have to give you anything, but in the discussion, I'm going to concede this. If Clinton had won, the US would have invaded Syria. I know there are US troops in Syria. I know that Trump has dropped as many bombs, or his administration has, as his predecessors. But I'm going to concede that if the lunatic and the arch criminal Hillary Clinton had won, I think you'd have had an Iraq situation in Syria now.
And who knows what will be going on with North Korea too.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what was sort of off in the wings waiting. But your point is really good. He is surrounded by many, many, many of the same people. I mean, not the ones that he could choose, but the ones that were left over, as she would have had too in her administration. And they were all kind of, I don't know about all, but a lot of them were on board with this plan that seemed to be taking the U.S. down the tubes really fast. So he has a major uphill battle. Can he do it, even if he is sincere? Well, I pray that he can, but we'll see, I guess.
There's loads of things that I'd like to talk to you about in the future. You know, traditional values. You've done some brilliant work, Polly. It's really thought-provoking stuff on traditional values and the family and religion. I'm kind of religious, or I used to say I'm an atheist, but you know, the older I get and the more I listen to others who have a different point of view to me, and the more tolerant I am in listening to other people, I've moved from kind of atheism to agnosticism, if I can say that. So
that's nice. That's good.
Moved a little bit, you know, I mean, I was brought up in Catholic Ireland. Give me a break, Polly. I was bound to run away from it. You know what I mean?
Yes, I had this period of time when I did too. And you know what? A lot of Catholics say the same thing, that they ran away. But it's sort of like a family where when you're a teenager, you run away, or you don't like anything your parents do, I guess, maybe, and you rebel, and then given time, you may come back. You may see the wisdom, you know, and that's, I like to leave it up to each individual to make those decisions, of course.
Brilliant. What are your ambitions now for the channel? I mean, it's growing and growing and growing. It's kind of growing exponentially. And what I like about you is you're very transparent. Now, I've been very hard on some independent content creators when they've behaved badly, in terms of when they've been sourcing money from people and they've been spending it on things. A couple of people come to mind. I won't mention them. What I love about you is you put out a quality broadcast. You ask for support for that, as you are well entitled to do. And you have used your funding to improve the quality of your output and to source equipment and all of that. I really admire that, Polly. So what's the
thank you.
Yeah, so what's the ambition for the Amazing Polly channel on YouTube? Where would you like to go with it?
Well, I want to be able to do more in-depth research like I'm starting to do. Maybe learn to use some software. This is my big dread. I really dislike doing that. I like to be reading about history and learning about all the things that I talk about rather than learning how to use a piece of software. But I really have to do that so that I can bring better things to my channel. I would love to get over my hesitation to do interviews and live streams and things like that, because I think it could be really, really valuable to get a bunch of opinions on the channel. And I could just let other people talk, you know.
But you're a natural conversationalist, and you're somebody who is genuinely interested in what other people have to say. I don't know where there's any hesitation. I think it'd be a natural for it, to be honest.
Oh, well, thanks for the vote of confidence.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be a fantastic addition to what you're already doing, bringing some people on. And with your demeanour and your openness, you'll be able to get people on who maybe take a different point of view to you and have a good chat about it. And
I would hope so. That is so vital.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying earlier, the polarization. We're not conversing with each other at all. And I really, really hope that somehow some of us can bridge those gaps. That would be great.
No doubt about it. Polly is in Ontario. I've mentioned already the YouTube channel is Amazing Polly. If you haven't already, and I know many of you have been there already, but if this is the first you've heard of Polly, go there and follow her on Twitter as well. Her Twitter handle is @99freemind. That's @99freemind. Thanks for giving us your time, Polly. I've enjoyed having you on, and I've really, really enjoyed not only watching your YouTube videos, but I've gotten a lot from them. I've learned a lot from them. And
thank you so much. I had a great time. I'm really glad you asked me to come on. I respect you so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Polly. We'll give a big shout to Gemma O'Doherty, who connected us. Gemma said to me, you've got to check out Polly. And I wasn't aware that YouTube had suspended her ability to live stream. That's not good. I'll give her a shout and ask her to come on the programme the next day or two. Polly, you're a star.
Great.
Thanks for coming on, and we'll do it again real soon with your permission.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Polly. Bye for now. That was Polly St. George. What a top lady. Amazing Polly on YouTube and @99freemind on Twitter. That's where you'll find her, @99freemind on Twitter. Polly St. George on The Richie Allen Show. Coming up for a minute and a half past 6 p.m. for January 14th, 2019. I am Richie Allen. Welcome to our show. Going to take a different direction shortly. I'm going to take a left turn or a right turn. Peter Paul Parker is going to be talking all things 5G. Don't miss him. Here's Stevie Wonder. Higher Ground from Stevie Wonder on The Richie Allen Show. About 5 years ago, and it might even be 5 years to the day. I don't know. But I was sitting in Moons. Now, it's not called Moons. It's called The Moon on the Water. I think it's The Moon on the Water anyway. It's a pub, a Weatherspoons pub in Wembley. And I was sitting in this pub with David Icke and Caroline, the future Mrs. Allen. And a chap came to our table because he recognised David Icke, but incredibly recognised him as a former professional football player. For our American friends, that'd be soccer. He had no idea that David Icke was into conspiracy research, or had written books, or travelled around the world, had done the Wogan Show. He hadn't a clue. Right? This is true. He recognised him as a former footballer. This guy must have been fairly blinkered now, in terms of, he was just a football fan. But anyway, he came over and they talked for a bit about football. And the inevitable question came. The chap said to David, what are you doing now? So he said, well, I'm here in London trying to get together, or trying to put on television programs for a new television channel. News and politics, but kind of alternative stuff. And the guy was like, he was interested. The guy was like, yeah, Really, what's that all about? And so he asked me to explain it to him. So I said to the guy, well, we're going to be inviting men and women on the programs that have a different perspective on the big news stories of the day. People who can challenge the versions that we get on the news, but legitimately and with evidence. Conspiracies and stuff like that. So the guy's ears pricked up, and he asked us to give an example of what we were talking about. So I asked him about September the 11th. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, what do you think about what happened on September the 11th? And the guy said, well, these Muslims, these terrorists, they crashed into these buildings and they killed all these people. And I said, well, you know, there are a lot of people, including a lot of intelligent people, not conspiracy theorists, but including a lot of establishment people, architects and engineers and structural engineers and seismologists and geologists. They think that it's a complete nonsense. And he was like, yeah. And David jumped in, and David said that, well, I would believe, said David, that the official story is not supported by any of the evidence. That the evidence supports that it happened, it was carried out by a third party as a false flag event in order to justify invading countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that. And the guy, this is true now, and the reason I'm thinking of this is because of what Polly said, because of what my friend Jean Ann said. The guy was so angered by what David said that he actually jumped up, I swear, on all that's sacred, took his beer and went to the end of the bar, muttering to himself, left his glass and walked away, left the pub, and actually left his jacket behind because his jacket was on the chair that he'd pulled up to sit next to us. He was absolutely offended by it. He couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Can't believe anybody would say something like that. And he walked away. And that's a complete stranger. So I've heard from a number of you on Twitter this afternoon. No surprise, says Moinga, that September the 11th still triggers antisocial vibrations when brought up with most people. And a number of people have said they're trying to get family members to look at it or look at any of the very good documentaries that are out there is a very difficult thing to do. It's 8.5 minutes past the hour. Peter Paul Parker, I'm hoping Peter is standing by. I've not seen him yet on the old Skype there. Very, very, very interesting man is Peter, and incredibly well briefed on all things EMF, on non-ionising radiation, on the rollout of 5G. So it could be that he's just getting into the office, Peter. He does work into the late afternoon. So we'll give him a couple of minutes and we'll get him on then. He's been writing on peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. He's been writing about, among other things, sleep disorders. My old friend, the sleep disorder. And I'm very interested in the relationship between Wi-Fi technology, which is everywhere, isn't it? Like it or lump it. We don't have it in our house, Richie. We connect to the internet through an Ethernet cable. Brilliant. Good for you. It's the right thing to do. But your neighbours have Wi-Fi. They do. And just across the street is a mast. Telephone mast. Yeah. I'm not trying to be arrogant here or sarcastic. I'm just saying escaping from it. Your body is exposed to it regardless of where you are. And I'm very interested in the relationship between EMF, non-ionising radiation, 5G, and its effect on sleeplessness, which seems to be an epidemic. Honestly, I see more stories. Now, there aren't too many people like myself who spend so much, say it for me, who spend as much time as I do on... sorry, I'm doing two things here. I'm chatting to you and I'm just keeping an eye out for Peter, who's got a new Skype handle and will Skype me in a minute. All good. It is a live radio show, you know, so I'll keep an eye on that. I spend a lot of time reading the press. A lot of time. And I'm talking about all the press. And in the last 6 months to 12 months, I've seen any number of stories about sleep disorders, about people struggling to sleep, about people not getting 8 hours sleep, about people getting a lot less than 8 hours sleep. I'm very interested in that. Right, I think I need to take a bit of a musical break there because Peter is struggling to connect with me. This is live radio. It happens. We'll get him on though. He's there, which is all good. This is your Richie Allen Show live on Monday, the 14th of January 2019. I'm sure you'll have questions for Peter. As usual, the way to reach me with those questions is simply through Twitter, right? Yeah, have we got some? We even got some music. Yeah, I think we have some music, have we? We have got the Doors lined up. There you are. Right, now, Peter Paul Parker, hopefully in a couple of minutes' time. Don't want to waste too much time. Want to get him on? Don't go anywhere. Right, let's get rid of the Doors then so we can have more time with my next guest. And it's been ages since he was on the programme. Now, he works very, very hard. He's a hard-working man. And he's not always easy to tie down. But it's been too long since he was on the show. Very lucky to meet him in London some years ago, referencing the television show Earlier, a few minutes ago, in fact, and the pub and all of that with David. But really lucky to meet him. Ben Gelblum, my producer, got him on. He's a Bach flower practitioner and a dietary consultant. He's also a brilliant musician, by the way. You can find him at peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. He's also at peterpaulparker.co.uk. He's very modest. So when I say that he's an expert on EMF technologies, on non-ionizing radiation, he's very modest and says, well, I just look into it a lot, but he's very, very well briefed. So there's no better time, really, to speak to him than now. Peter Paul Parker. Peter, welcome back to the programme, mate. I know you're busy. Thanks for giving us your time. How are you?
I'm very, very good. How are you?
I'm thrilled, mate. It's been too long and time flies by. I think it was summer 2017, late summer 2017 last time you were on. No excuse for that. Because if you look at that show on Podomatic, it's had 20,000 downloads and it was a hugely popular show, that. So no excuses for you not being back on. But I'm so glad you are. How have things been? I know you're very busy with your work around health as well as your music. How have things been for you?
They've been really good. I've kind of gone on a new direction with health. I've really got into that deep breathing, Qigong, trying to get away from all this confusion that's been throwing into the world, all these things that are sent to confuse us. I just want to get away from them. And I'm really finding I'm getting more healthy. I am slightly electro hypersensitive, and I've found myself got a little bit away from that now. I feel a lot better, but I still feel it when I go into London, say, or a building where they've got strong Wi-Fi or strong electromagnetic frequencies. I still can't handle it. I still feel a bit hot under the collar, but it's better through what I've been doing as a Qigong instructor. I've started taking up Qigong.
Yeah, what is Qigong? We've got plenty of time. We can go right to the top of the hour now, so take your time. What is Qigong? That sounds interesting. Qigong
basically is combining the mind with the body and the breath, which sounds very, very easy. But when you actually do it, it's quite profound. Your brain actually starts to relax. We'll get into the Schumann resonance a bit later, which is in between the theta and the alpha waves of the brain. So when you really do get on top of Qigong, a Qigong practice, you bring your brain down into that frequency, which is the natural frequency of the earth. And our electromagnetic frequency is being disturbed by this pollution that we're living under now, which really does disturb me a lot, because it's psychotic, the behavior of our establishments across the world, putting this stuff into our domain.
Yeah.
But so Qigong really has helped me get away from that sort of unhealthy feeling. But I've got a feeling with 5G, there's going to be no escaping it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that now. It's from the Orient, Peter, is it? It's Chinese by the sounds of it, Qigong.
Yeah, my take on it is from South Korea. It's by a guy called Ilchi Lee, who's actually for nation states, by the way. He's trying to push this across the world as a way of actually understanding the human body a little bit deeper, and to make you feel like you are sovereign, that you can actually take control of your own life, and that a government doesn't have to dictate to you. You can actually do it for yourself. You can actually be sovereign. So that really does fit into what I feel like, which is I want to be a sovereign human being, and I don't want all this stuff coming from government telling you should be doing this, you should be doing that. It's ridiculous. And we seem to be falling into it like lemmings off the top of a cliff, just going along with anything that they say now without actually thinking about it. And when you look at the latest research going on about human attention spans, our attention spans have dropped less than a goldfish. We have a less attention span now than a goldfish. So it's incredible. It's crazy.
I'm sitting here and I'm nodding along with you because I know people will laugh and say attention span of a goldfish. Peter is exaggerating there. You're not, Peter, because look, I see it. Caroline and myself, we, like most people, we don't have the means to go out often, but we do make sure we go out, once every couple of months we go out. We go and see a concert, we go into the city, and people can't go 15, 20 seconds without picking up their phone or their tablet. It is horrifying to watch it, and it's not an exaggeration. It's not me trying to make the exception the rule. It is the rule everywhere you go. That is indicative of a real problem with attention span. You're going for the phone. Somebody's speaking to you, and you're going for the phone, and you're going for the phone, and you're going for the phone. It's an epidemic, isn't it?
I think they said it's about 1,500 times a day someone actually touches their smartphone on average.
Yeah.
1,500 times a day. That's more times than you scratch your head. Or
yeah.
It's the most common action now that you do as a human being is reaching for your smartphone. I mean, this is a really serious problem, and I think it was they said that it's not harmful. Screens aren't necessarily harmful to human beings. The health people of this country said, and I was listening to that. It came through on mainstream media, and there's been tons of research about screens being detrimental to health. What they emit is electromagnetic frequencies, and some of them have certain lights that really seep into the body. And we're giving this to kids now. I've seen now most children have these tablets, and you've got this radiation going into these tablets, and these kids are being brought up, weaned on these tablets. And I'm saying to myself, what is this going to be like in 50 years' time? You're going to have 1 in 2. Well, no, everybody in 2050, everybody will have cancer. 2025, 1 in 2 people are going to have cancer. In America, the autism rates, 1 in about 35 or something is going to be soon. 1 in 20 males, something like that. And EMFs and the chemtrail or the geoengineering and the vaccines and the mercury in the vaccines, it's all interlinked with this autism epidemic that we've got.
Just before we talk a little bit about autism, tell me about that 1 in 2 people developing some sort of cancer by 2025. Some of my critics, and I shouldn't say my critics, but some of the show's critics would say I should challenge you pretty hard on that. How do we know that 1 in 2 will have cancer by 2025?
These are studies by the World Health Organization. These are big organizations that are actually saying this. It's not me saying it. It's these big organizations. It's like the World Health Organization has said that EMFs are possible carcinogens. It's just, so they are actually telling us what's happening to us, and nobody is actually doing anything. Everybody I know, virtually everybody I know, has got someone who's got cancer or has died of cancer. One of my music business buddies just recently died of cancer. He was a young man, a young Irish singer, and he was looking forward to a wonderful career, and he got lymph cancer. And you think there's nothing wrong with him. But I said, are you turning your Wi-Fi off in your flat? It was and no, and he's still using his mobile phone. But I'm going out now looking after about 50 odd people with my Qigong practice, and everybody has got somebody who's got really serious either sleeping disorders, cancer, all sorts of stress disorders. It's this is real.
It is real, and you've been writing about this on your WordPress site. I was challenging you there, knowing you would know the answer, and through people like yourself that I know these studies, they sometimes appear on breakfast television here in the UK. Peter is right; they are projecting a massive increase in cancer, but of course they're not going to go into the sort of depths on these programs. They've got millions more viewers than we'll ever have, but they won't go into great detail on these programs. Peter's absolutely right here. You wrote about sleeplessness on your WordPress site, peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. We're in the middle of a sleeplessness epidemic, aren't we? This is no joke. Yeah. I study the mainstream media as part of doing a kind of a news roundup for this program every day. I'm getting fed up of reading stories about sleeplessness and how people can't figure out why, and it never affected me before, and it's not in my family. I don't get 4 hours. I don't get 5 hours. I'm lucky to get 3. Epidemic, Peter, and you're convinced, and I'm convinced that the prevalence of Wi-Fi devices and using the screens 1,500 times a day on your phone, they're having a profound effect on our brains, and we're agitated, so we can't sleep.
Yeah. We're water-based beings. About 70% of us are water-based, and these things are getting into us. This electromagnetic frequency is actually getting into us. Going on to 5G just for a second, 5G actually gets affected by water, so they're worried about it going through water. But if you look at it on the human level, what it is affecting the hemoglobin's ability to bind to the oxygen molecules, which are being disturbed because they've got water in them. So it's actually saying to us, this research is saying to us, we're not going to be able to breathe. We're not going to be able to bring oxygen into the body. So if you can go a month without food, maybe 3 days without water, maybe more, 3 minutes without oxygen. So if you've got this turned up, 5G is a weaponized frequency. That's a fact. There's no argument about that. There's enough research out there telling us that. But this is going to stop us from breathing. So if you can see all the rising of the figures of people with problems with their breathing and their chest, and then sleeping because they can't breathe properly, they can't sleep. So if you look at the breathing and how the lungs work, the lungs start to wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning to 5, which is like where the energy starts to come into the lungs. And when it's very heavy electromagnetic frequency around me, I start to wake up around 3 to 5 because my lungs don't feel right. So I have to do some deep breathing techniques to try and get myself back to sleep. So this is going to start not only affecting every other organ in the body, it affects our breathing, our actual way of absorbing oxygen into the body. I don't know what else you can say about that. It
doesn't get any worse, and this is not widely known. It's not known at all. It isn't. I mean, you talking about the effect it's going to have on people's ability to breathe is new to me, to be honest. I mean, there's so much else wrong with it. It operates on a frequency that makes it easier to penetrate us. That I've learned, Peter. This 5th generation. There's also no doubt that it's completely unnecessary. There isn't anything wrong with the connectivity that they've already put in place, harmful or not, but 4G is incredibly fast. People are not, complaining about not being able to get online. There's no need for this, is there? There isn't any need for this in terms of global communication. This is about something far more deep and sinister and mendacious than maybe people want to imagine.
It's about, at the end of the day, it's about artificial intelligence. If you look at these lunatics like Ray Kurzweil, and they are very high up in our society, and what they write about and how they've actually got now nets that they can put into the brain which connect wirelessly to your computer. So you can take in something, you inject or you take in a nanotechnology, and it will become a net in your brain which covers your brain, and then you can actually go into a computer. What they want with the 5G and why they need it is so that they can have what they call a sentient world simulation, which is a project to continuously run and update what is happening in our world so they can predict and evaluate future events and courses of action, i.e. they want full spectrum dominance of the human being and how we are going to react in their world so that they can actually completely control us.
You have to be a madman to come up with something like a neural net that is injected into the human brain. You know, and you have to laugh, don't you? Because if we don't laugh, we go insane. But you have to be absolutely crazy to think that it's necessary to put something on a person's brain that means that they can close their eyes and go online, or however the bloody hell it works. So people have to get through their heads. That's not about convenience for people. You see, this is what annoys me. People will say, this is amazing, it's progress, it's wonderful, look at this, aren't we, as human beings, aren't we, you know, entering new frontiers, this is amazing. No, it's not amazing. You can see your computer screen with your eyes. You don't need a neural net on your brain developed by Ray Kurzweil. Surely, Peter, they must begin to suspect sometime in the near future, people, that we're being co-opted. Our bodies are being co-opted into something that's completely different and dangerous. Something that's non-human. It's got to occur to them, right? Surely.
Yeah. Well, to me, if you defining the word satanic, satanic means bringing you away from nature, bringing you away from what is natural to you and what is natural to your environment. So what we're doing is we're being pulled into a non-natural environment, which some would call satanic, some would call, I don't know, it could be linked to off-world technology. Who knows? Our technology is just suddenly skyward. If you look from the invention of the telephone to where we are now, it's incredible. So
too quick.
Yes. There is something really sinister behind it, because if you've got any human being who wants to be the center of your world and have full spectrum dominance over you, that is, to me, satanic, because it's not natural. We as human beings are actually group animals. When we get rid of all our preconceptions, all our thoughts and feelings that have been programmed into us, we actually come from a place called 0 point, which what Ilchi Lee talks about, where you take on information into your brain and you will see that as a natural human being. You'll see it as, when you say putting a neural net into someone's brain, you will laugh because it's so ridiculous, but it's truly happening. When you say that they're setting up a sentient world simulation, which if you just Google sentient world simulation, you'll see the project is really happening. If you look at there's another thing people should Google, which is architecture of radio. It's an app that you can put onto your phone, and it will show you the electromagnetic frequencies that are around in your house and around your environment. And you will see that you are bombarded with it already. So that's not good for you whatsoever. But when they bring it into this 5G, which is it's millimeter, it's a milliwave radiation, and it's one of the greatest ever disasters human beings could ever imagine. You know Barry Trower's Thalidomide in the Making, his paper.
Yeah.
I mean, this 5G makes that look like a walk in the park compared to what we're going to get when we get that, because we're going to have complete collapse of human beings, complete collapse. There'll be no birth. It's cumulative. It keeps coming on and on and on. So the more you get, the more you're immersed into this, the deeper the damage goes. And once you get electro-hypersensitive, it's very, very difficult to actually live anywhere near any of this technology. And I feel sorry for all the human beings who are really, really electro-hypersensitive, because they can't live in our world anymore. They can't live anywhere near us. And they have to go away and live in the country, come off grid, and those numbers are growing. There's more people I know who are just walking away from this craziness.
I used to think they were crazy years ago. I think the first time, I think the first time we met, you probably suspected, despite my allegiances and friendships, you probably suspected that I was fairly skeptical. I was. There's nothing wrong with being skeptical. There's only something wrong with keeping your head in the sand when you're proved wrong, and I was proved wrong. I've heard from so many people all around the world suffer from hypoelectric sensitivity. I see what it does to them. You know, regular people, smart people, not paranoid in any way. It's absolutely real. And I know there will be people listening to this now and they won't believe it, and that's fine. Thanks for listening anyway. I appreciate you listening and giving a chance to something that you find to be, you know, a bit far out there. But let me just endorse what Peter is saying. And I'm not going to endorse it because I know anything. I know nothing. That's why he's on the programme. But I'm going to use mainstream media to endorse what Peter has just told you. And then I'm going to get out of Peter's way again. Peter Paul Parker is our guest. peterpaulparker.wordpress.com or peterpaulparker.co.uk. Terrific guy. One of the nicest guys I've been lucky enough to meet on this journey. And his research is brilliant. He's always brilliantly briefed. And he can support what he's saying. Here's a story from the BBC back in November, which I covered on this programme. Remarkable global decline in the number of children women are having. Fertility collapsing all around the world. Nearly half of countries on planet Earth are now facing a baby bust, meaning there are insufficient children to maintain their population size. We're not having children. You know, I can list amongst my contacts and amongst my friends, of course it's very confidential, guys who've got issues with fertility, with sperm count, with, you know, with their partner becoming pregnant. And it's amazing, Peter, you know, they publish these studies, the BBC, but they don't want to know why, you know what I mean? Why is it happening? It's just fertility is collapsing all over the planet. There you go. And in other news, Arsene Wenger was sacked by Arsenal. You know, why is fertility dropping?
Planet Bizarro.
Madness, isn't it? So,
when you think about the frequencies used, they're virtually identical. Some of the human being internal workings, it's energy. So, the DNA is, say, about 1 millimeter where the strands communicate with each other. And this is the same millimeter wave used with 5G technology, and it specifically harms the mitochondria in the embryos. So that means when the eggs are developing in the grandchild in the womb, the mitochondria, that is the eggs in the baby, they are becoming radiated and killed off. So after the third generation comes through, they will be born sterile. Now, this research has been done and tested on rats in the 60s, and they found that the rats survive, but they become extinct because of the damage to their reproductive organs. Also, the radiation lowers testosterone and sperm counts, and it's also this technology is also linked with the mercury from vaccines like the thimerosal, and this radiation combined with the thimerosal is causing autism. So this is not a direct kill weapon, as it were. It's a slow, cumulative way of actually sterilizing the population. If you go into some research into the Rockefeller Foundation and how they introduced eugenics many, many years ago, and how they took over the health industry, which is absolutely appalling, from going from homeopathic to allopathic, it's incredible how they've got away with that in itself, but now they're doing whatever they can to reduce the population, and America will be at crisis point very, very soon, because you're going to have more autistic children than you're going to be able to look after. Their debt has just gone above their national GDP. They've got lunatics in charge. I mean, who knows what Trump is doing? He does one thing, then he does another.
Yeah. Some
things you think he's going to do something good, and then he does something ridiculous. And you've got all the lot behind him who are just calling the shots, and they're psychopaths, they're psychotic, and they've got no thought or empathy for any other human being, and they just seem to be rolling this out. For instance, a very good example of that was Tom Wheeler, the FCC speech, which he did in 2016, I think it was. I mean, that was so sinister and psychotic. And he said, we're not going to wait to see if this is safe. We're just going to get it out to the people. And I didn't realise, but when I did a bit of research on him, he was actually a lobbyist for the telecommunication industry.
Yeah.
and he was the spokesperson for the FCC in America. And you go, how many times have you got to reveal all of this stuff to people before they go, actually, there is something going on in the background here. There is something going on. What can we do? Because they're not people. A lot of people aren't even acknowledging that there's something going on in the background. And we've got to start to see that. And what I love about what I do with the Qigong practice and the people that I'm associating with now, we're looking for the best in humanity. We're looking for the best in ourselves. And then we pass that on to our fellow human beings in our local community. And I think this is one way of bringing down this cabal that's doing what it's doing to us. Because if we don't do that, honestly, what their future will be so dystopic. It makes some of these films that they show of how they project us into our future will be a walk in the park compared to what it will really be.
Yeah, it's funny because funny you say that, because speaking with my guest in the first hour, we talked about dystopian future films, the films that we watched in the 80s, and it's looking worse than even those films predicted. Let me just read a couple of tweets, because I do promise that I'll read the tweets, and then sometimes I don't. Daniel is listening to this with great interest. He believes that it's part of the depopulation agenda, playing into the mega region smart city agenda, which plays into, he thinks, the transhumanist agenda. I know Daniel is a big reader of the works of David Icke. Patricia is listening to this in Austria, in Switzerland, friend of ours, and she says, would it be wrong to compare humans to the frog in the boiling water analogy? Start slowly, cell phones, smartphones, total internet control, and now 5G. The boiling point is here. Too late, or is there hope? Well, you're just talking about that. You don't believe it is too late, Peter. You don't?
No, I don't. I think we can turn this around. I really do believe there's enough people on the planet now who are starting to wake up. There's people I'm starting to meet who kind of work for the UN and on and off and are involved with UNICEF, and they're starting to see the corruption and how bad it is, and they're starting to think, well, what can I do to turn this around? Not that I think that we should have any centralization of power whatsoever as human beings. I don't think our consciousness is ready for that even. So the whole centralization of power is madness in my eyes, in my humble opinion. But they are starting to see these things in front of their eyes. And I'm getting reports now from paedophilia happening in the UN, paedophilia happening in UNICEF, and how they bond these things together, and how difficult it is to speak up against it, how difficult it is to stop the abuse of women in some countries. It's interesting, the conversations I'm having, that people are starting to take this seriously now and not just look away and look the other way because it's something that they can't deal with or can't look at. It's the weakness of human beings is got so much. What's his name, Edward Bernays, wrote in his book Propaganda, we will use their liberalness against them. My goodness, have they done that? Everybody's so free and liberal and so happy now. They don't even have any empathy or compassion for their fellow human beings. They'll look at other people now on the street and just walk past them and go, whoa, they should do something more to help themselves. Whatever happened to empathy or compassion? Or actually, there's people suffering over there. Why can't we help them? Why can't we do something? You think of all this money in the world that we have now, more money, well, more debt than money, I should say, because of the banking system. But you look at all that money, it would take 186 billion pounds or dollars, I think it is, to take the whole world out of extreme poverty. And yet we're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions, maybe trillions, on military and battling and fighting with each other. When if we spent that money on actually looking after our planet, looking after our resources and looking after each other, we would have an amazing existence, which would have its problems anyway. Just being human in itself is troublesome because you have to look after your body, you have to look after your mind, you have to look after your consciousness. But to have this on top of being human with these lunatics behind us, I find it's almost laughable It's almost laughable that it's so ridiculous, our existence on Earth at the moment. But I will say, there are people who are standing up now, and I'm seeing more and more of it, and more people actually going into places like councils and even standing as politicians and saying, no, we're not having this anymore. And I'll give you an example of what I did. I won't actually mention the council, but I went into a council meeting about 3 or 4 months ago, and they were talking about the health projection for the areas that I live near. So I thought, oh, this will be interesting. It was all about Agenda 21, Agenda 30. It was all about how medical intervention will help people. And I put my hand up and asked the question, what about the chemical stresses that are happening, especially to the elderly? What about the chemical stresses? And it was like someone just chucked in
a hand grenade,
a pork pie to a synagogue or something like that. It was just like, oh my God, what is this guy saying? So they're saying, well, we'll look into it then. And then I said, what about the physical stresses we're having, like the Wi-Fi and that's actually physically stressing out the body. And there's research, 70% of the research says that this is detrimental to human health. And again, they say, well, we'll look into it, sort of thing. And then the next meeting I went to, I was completely stonewalled. I was like pushed to the side, and no one really wanted to talk to me because I was asking the questions people didn't want to hear. Now, what we need is more people to actually get out there and just start questioning people, questioning authority, because we shouldn't have people who are authority over us. Where did that word come from in the first place? They're supposed to be our representatives, not our authority. Politicians have got no clue of what is going on in the world at the moment.
That's the thing, isn't it? What's wrong with me? Compartmentalization, that's what it is. How many people, could you imagine? I say to people sometimes, sometimes I think people, they get it halfway, but they don't get it entirely. And they blame May, or they blame Corbyn, or they blame Trump. And I'm like, do you really think that these people are in effect running things? And how much do you think these people actually know? Because somebody might ask Peter Paul Parker, Peter, why will they roll out this technology that's going to devastate everyone when it's going to devastate them? And it's maybe because the people doing the rolling out of the stuff are not really aware of what it's going to do, but they're superiors. And if you go further up the chain, those people maybe will understand what it is. It's got to be compartmentalization, right? Plausible deniability.
Definitely. You see it. Well, I don't know if you've been watching Mark Steele up in Gateshead with the council he's doing. He's just come out of court today, and they're saying there is something behind the councillors. The councillors have got no idea of this technology. There's one common purpose agent, I think, who's heading the whole lot of it, and she is exposing herself left, right and centre. I think she was sacked from her job in Liverpool, I think it was, for £300,000 payoff. Thank you very much. And she's instigating the defence for the council against Mark Steele, trying to get the lights taken away, the 5G technology taken out of the streets of Gateshead.
He's an interesting guy, Peter. Can I just very quickly interject? Because Mark was on this programme. I spoke to Mark and I found him...
Oh, brilliant.
I found him... This is 10 months ago, maybe. I found him plausible. He was a nice guy, genuinely concerned. He has his background in tech, and he came on. Now, I obviously then, of course, emailed Gateshead, asking them to respond to what was said by Mark on the programme, but I never got an answer. What happened then thereafter was Gateshead went to the media, the council that is, and said that Mark was telling fibs about the lampposts and that this technology wasn't rolled out there. And that's where it was kind of left. And he said, well, it was there, and I've got the evidence to prove it. And he's put a lot of stuff in the public domain. He's in court today and tomorrow, expected to conclude tomorrow, I think. Watching that one closely, but I don't know. I believe everything he said about the technology and what it's going to do. I don't know if maybe he got the wrong end of the stick about what was going on in Gateshead. I'm not trying to...
no, I know what you mean, yeah.
I don't know. I'm not trying to say Mark was wrong. And not for a minute am I saying that. But I just don't know. It's hard to know. I do believe he's very sincere. I believe the chap is sincere. And he certainly know... I know there are some people in the so-called truther community who've called him... they've said he's some sort of shill, that ridiculous word they throw at people they don't agree with. But I don't see him as a shill. I think he's genuinely concerned, and I think he did uncover a bit of nefarious stuff going on in Gateshead. I'm very interested in that case, definitely.
This truther movement is quite funny. I put when I did a blog, I mentioned microintelligence and Ubuntu, which I really love the idea of that. Again, our consciousness needs to rise, but our contributing into a society, and we having everything that we want or need, but we're conscious enough to realise that not to be greedy. And when I mentioned that, someone commented on the end of my blog saying, "Well, he's definitely working for the UN and part of the world agenda." And I'm thinking,
yeah, ridiculous.
Just a musician, as a musician and a researcher and an activist, living in Surrey, thinking I'm working for the UN.
Yeah.
Are you out of your mind? It's just, these people are deluded. You need to get out of your keyboard warrior desires and get out into the real world and start speaking with people. And you realise that actually there is a real agenda going on, but it's not as well sort of numbered as they seem to believe it is, that we're all sitting here. We all make mistakes, Richie. We all could stand and sit and talk, because we talk about this stuff quite a lot. We all make mistakes, and you can always bring those mistakes and admit them. I said, okay, that was wrong. But I've never felt embarrassed about me speaking out about 9/11 to Ed Davey, the politician of Kingston Surbiton, or Kwasi Kwarteng. I actually saw Ed Davey the other day. I was playing some music on the stage, and I saw him, and he didn't want to come near me. He didn't want to come anywhere near me. You could see him actually sheeping away, and he's quite a big guy. Not that he's threatening at all, but you could see he was moving away. And this is what we should be doing with all our politicians, is actually firing them with questions, not nastily, but just firing them with questions to make them realise you don't know what you are talking about when you're talking about this issue, especially 9/11. And you can talk for hours and hours and hours on 9/11. And You've hit on something very important there, and it's more than important. You've hit on a very important, really, really serious theme. People who are becoming aware of what's happening, they need to lose the mindset that the MPs are all gatekeepers, that every one of them knows what's going on and they're all intimately involved. They're not. They're not at all. They haven't a clue. And yes, okay, they take money from special interest groups. Yes, MPs know that they're not serving the public. I will give you that. MPs know full well they're not serving the public. They know this. But that's all they know. They're motivated by self-interest, by money, by advancement. Peter has hit on something hugely important. When you go and speak to these people, Peter is brilliant because he does it politely and he says, consider this. But he knows that Ed Davey doesn't have the force. He's a former Lib Dem MP. He's in the House of Lords now. He's the Knight of the Realm these days. They don't have a clue about 9/11. End of story. A brilliant point, Peter. Brilliant, mate. People need to wake up to that. Kwasi Kwarteng, I must admit, did say he was going to look into it, but he never did. He never came back to me. And you just disbelief. I sit there in disbelief to believe that politics has got so bad. I studied it at A level when I was at school. And I remember looking at quangos. They came into quangos to say as if quangos were acceptable. And I said, so you've got organisations who are not governmental that are actually sort of putting in legislation or helping them to
dictating policy, and
then,
drafting legislation. That's right. Yeah.
And now it's NGOs all over the world. And there was a classic conversation that the European Union is obviously a big issue at the moment. There was a classic conversation. Someone was talking about, the wine's going to go up for us to buy wine. And I just said one thing, and this is the kind of reaction that you get. I said, well, what about open society, and George Soros pumping 18 billion euros into that. And their open society having, I think it was 65 meetings in 1 year with the European Commission. 65, that's almost 3 a month.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're thinking, well, who are these people? And we have no way of getting anywhere near legislation or policies that they give us with their directives. Even with the Parliament, that's a joke. I remember researching into it with my wife, and we looked at it. We went, these people are actually running this country. And I said to this lady, what do you do about that? She goes, well, it needs to change. I said, needs to change? I said, it needs to go.
Needs to go. Yeah. See, again, this is central to my thinking and what I've come to understand. Spoke about this with Polly St. George in the first hour. The system is not reparable. You can't replace the people that you have now with good, clean and wholesome people. You can't do that. The system itself is redundant and has to go. It's as simple as that. An example of what you were talking there about quangos. We saw extraordinary things last week where Nicky Morgan, the former Education Secretary, and Yvette Cooper, senior Labour MP, got together and managed to change hundreds of years of how the government, how Parliament operates and how Parliament does business. And in the same week, the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve was able to do the same thing and add an amendment onto this withdrawal bill that's going to be voted on tomorrow. Basically what Morgan and Cooper did and Grieve did was circumvent parliamentary procedure and make it all the more impossible for a no-deal Brexit or a proper Brexit. And what you've been talking about there, NGOs and quangos, you are 1,000,000% right. Nobody can tell me that Yvette Cooper and Nicky Morgan, daft fucking mayors is what they are, and Dominic Grieve, who has to take his penis out of his pocket to count to 11. Nobody can tell me that they came up with that idea by themselves. They didn't, Peter, did they?
No.
They were told to do it by people who exist in the shadows, whose names, as you quite rightly said, we'll never know.
No. If you look at, you're talking about the system now, if you look at, this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, ever since the Magna Carta came. When they released the Magna Carta, which is, I think was a wonderful document, even though a lot of it was still the king, then they all of a sudden, a year later, they had the Act of the Magna Carta. So therefore it becomes into their Mickey Mouse game of acts and statutes, which means exactly you've got that the whole straw man thing being created, you being not a human being, and then 1666 you're declared dead, I think it was, and it just keeps, it's just eroding and eroding and eroding and eroding. Everything that we possibly could do as a human, sentient human being is being eroded, so that at the end of the day they will come and knock on the doors and say, well, it's time for you to move to this area because this is a human development zone.
Yeah.
No longer can you live here. And this universal wage is part of that, because once you start to become dependent on the government, then they can come and knock on the door and say whatever they want to you. And that's what they're planning. That's what all these AI people are talking about. I think that idiot from Facebook's talking about it as well. Having a universal wage that you don't have to do anything for your money, and of course you're going to have just such a liberal, sloppy, lazy population that they'll be so docile, they'll be so easy to control that they won't say anything to anybody. No. A bit like it is now. We're right up on time, obviously, Peter. Listen, do me a favour, make a promise to me. In a couple of months' time, when you can make a bit of time, come back on and we'll go a bit longer, because there's a lot more I'd like to get into today. I'd like to hear more about Qigong, sincerely. A lot of our listeners would, and talk about that in a positive way, and some of the other very positive things that you're into. It's important to talk about the symptoms and to explain what's happening. It's very important, but there are solutions. Maybe we could have spent a bit more time on solutions today, but that's my fault for not doing that. So do me a favour, come back. It's peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. Peter's on Twitter as well. I'll give you the last word, mate. We've got about 30 seconds. And thanks, Peter. I really love having you on, mate. It's been too long. Last word to you. Focus on you. Focus on yourself. Get into your body. Breathe deeply. Look into sounds that make you feel good and wholesome. Get into love. Live out of the heart. Don't take what these people are giving to you. Just take what you need from your world, because they will destroy you. They'll get inside of you and they'll make you fight and hate and really destroy everything around you, which is what they nearly did to me. And then you realize I'd get into sound. Sound healing is amazing. Get into Qigong breathing, getting into the mind, the body and the breath, and really think about yourself and what this is. And you said you're agnostic. I'm actually agnostic. I feeling I'm starting to know what I am and where I've kind of come from, which is like a universal energy thing. And this body is just a vehicle for as an experience. And you deep down inside of you start to realize that once you start to study going on the inside, which is one of the reasons they've got all these little trinkets and arguments and things to make you go outside. So you think your mind is often in the future, often in the past, very rarely in the present. And that's where the true essence of mindfulness is, not what they teach now as in companies and schools. It's the real deal. It's how human beings have been living for thousands of years. And we'll get through this, even if it's a tiny population, as a real human beings looking after each other.
Will you talk,
hold on to that thought.
Will you talk about that more next time you come back, Peter? Because I'm all ears.
That's my favourite subject.
Well, thanks for coming on today. Godspeed to you and yours. And I'm sure you'll have a fantastic 2019. Come back real soon, Peter. And thanks for your time again today. I really mean that. My pleasure, Richie. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And love to all your listeners as well. Cheers, Peter. Keep spreading the love. Thanks, mate. That's the terrific Peter Paul Parker live on the Richie Allen Show. Amazing guy. Check out peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. Be great to get him back on again real soon. I'll arrange that with an email to Peter a bit later on. That's it for the programme. Thanks to Polly St. George and Peter as well. It's Amazing Polly on YouTube. Amazing Polly. And peterpaulparker.wordpress.com. That was the Richie Allen Show for Monday. Until tomorrow at 5. Bye now.